super strength in his heat vision, though, I feel like he could get it up.
Yeah. Anyway, let's quit talking about Superman getting it up, and let's talk about this episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Super2. Joining me today is Steve Baxey, and once again, the most delicious Geeky Gentleman, Ruben DeBoard.
Hello.
Hey. Steve picked our topic this week. Steve, what we talking about?
We are talking about video games, particularly modern video game industry, and particularly just the way we make video games now and how it's different and what we can and can't do. That sounds very general, but I'm trying to make it sound a little bit more narrow in that and just say something along the lines of, like, I think this might be a good place to start. But if anybody watches Folding Ideas, that's one of my favorite YouTube channels, but at one point they were talking about how there used to be this criticism that video games have gotten easier over time. But the pushback on that is that they haven't gotten easier. They've just been made better, so you're not just running around aimlessly for 10 minutes not knowing what to do. Mm-hmm. The mechanics and the language of video games have gotten better, so it feels like they're easier. And I think that's really interesting.
That and save spots make a world of difference, right?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. So, this is weird for me to talk about, because I am so not on any level a modern gamer. The newest game I bought was from 2013, and it was a collection of the Ratchet & Clank PS2 games.
You realize that is half a decade ago.
I know. I'm well aware that I'm an old man, Steve.
Half a decade.
Yeah.
I'm even worse. My newest system, I think I've mentioned this before, my newest system that I have is a Game Boy Advance.
Oh, God.
Like, not even the one that looks like a little mini laptop computer, just the regular Game Boy Advance. So I feel like I've got things to say, but then you guys will say something, I'm going to be like, what are they talking about? I don't know. So, yeah. I'm also an old man.
This is totally the wrong topic for this crowd, but that's okay. We're going to force ourselves through it.
Well, I think the video game industry is incredibly interesting. And, like, what's weird for me is it's weird to me to talk about video games as their own industry, which obviously they are, but, like, it's the first, like, major media industry that more or less I grew up with. And, I didn't notice it until it was already a thing, right? Like, to me, growing up, video games were just a thing that existed, and they were getting better and better and bigger, and I didn't connect, because I was too young to think about, like, the business side of things, I didn't connect to it the same way that I think of, like, big movie studios or big, I don't know, television or meat packing, I don't know, you know what I mean? Big industry stuff. Yeah, I know, those are such a streamlined connection. I was like, okay, well, I just said movies, so TV was kind of a dumb example to pull. So try to pull an example that's not a media thing. And I'm like, okay, meat packing. Yeah, that was connection.
Ian was just fascinated by the intricacies of butchers and meat packing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's more interesting than I feel people give it credit for. But anyway. No, just like the fact that it was this multi-billion-dollar industry just completely passed me by. I didn't even think about it until it was already there. It was too late, in a sense. And so it's weird to me to think about in retrospect, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all three of us, because I don't know when the very first video game was, but I know that popular video games like the first Mario game and like the like that, those were like mid 80s, and like all of us are younger than that. So I think that we are of that generation where like people 5 to 10 years older than us remember the first video games that were like really popular in America. And I'm assuming we're going to kind of focus on like American video games, but if you want to branch it out, then that'll be fine too. But like that's, you know, the people who are, you know, a generation older than us, they were the ones who kind of were introduced to it. And then, like you said, Ian, like when we were born and we're growing up, it's like it's already there for us. And then, you know, we're the ones who kind of came in where it was already established and got to, I don't want to say that the previous generation was like the beta testers, but that's kind of what they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's another good place to go with this, because I feel like there are, as far as people that actively keep up with video games, not casual people like you, like us, but I feel like people that are really into video games that are older than us have like two diverging personality types. Either you have like the really hardcore gamers that have followed video games since they were kids and have just progressively been more and more observed into what's become a modern gaming. And so like they'll have very intricate and important and helpful knowledge about contemporary video games, but then they can dial back to Mario Kart and have fucking strategies for that. And then you have the people that checked off at a certain point where you try to play them in a Mario game and they will kick your ass repeatedly, but you try to explain to them how Arkham City works and they are just lost.
Yeah.
And I think that I think it's important that to mention that, partly because video game learning curves don't seem to exist anymore. You see it in some games. Fighter Z, or not Fighter Z, it's Fighters, but you can say it either way, whatever. Fighters has a thing where in the story mode, every map that you move on to continue the story, literally every level has like 3 or 4 tutorial fights, because Dragon Ball Z has never been like a hardcore fighting game except for this. So the game makers did not trust Dragon Ball Z gamers to buy this and understand how it works. So they just hammer tutorials into you. But that's not how video games work anymore. I played Call of Duty up from Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare up to like Black Ops 2. Maybe Black Ops 1, I don't remember exactly. But everything that comes between where I checked off to where we are now implies that you've kept up, and they give you no help whatsoever in learning that shit. You just have to jump in and figure it out.
That's interesting though, because of course a lot of gamers complain about tutorials, right?
Yeah.
Like so many gamers, and I've been this way where I'm like, I already know how to do this. Like I've been playing through the Spyro games, the original trilogy.
Well, if you notice, they don't give you tutorial books in the actual discs anymore.
Oh, that's crazy. No, but like I've been playing through the Spyro games, and after the first game, I know how to do everything. The controls really don't change besides adding a move or two, and it's not a difficult combo to pull off. It's X triangle, right? But yet, you're like required to go through tutorial stuff, and I feel myself getting annoyed having to go through the tutorial to do the thing I already know how to do, that there's no option around it. You just have to do it. That's aggravating as hell. So that's why tutorials have gone away. And yet, you're right, like, you do need them if you want more people to get into them, into video games.
Well, and particularly because people never start where they are meant to start. I don't know this fact, or I'd have to look up the statistic, but I guarantee you there are more people that bought Uncharted 2 than people that bought Uncharted 1. There are more people that bought Jak and Dexter 2 than Jak and Dexter 1. As those sales go up, you have to at a certain point say that there have been a lot more people on the sequel than there are in the original, but the sequel has progressively moved away from explaining what the hell you're doing. Uncharted 4 has like a little basic tutorial, but most of that game is like instincts. If you don't know where everything is, you don't understand the sort of like, for some reason you're using the bumper instead of the trigger, because all Uncharted games like that, it is confusing as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, talking about your point earlier about how video games have gotten easier, or maybe not. I remember back when I was in middle school and junior high, when I was first getting into the Pokemon games, the Generation 1 Pokemon games, and that was like the game that like everyone, Pokemon was just huge when I was in like 5th and 6th grade. And I remember by word of mouth, you had to find out how to clone items and how to clone Pokemon. And these were glitches that were not meant to be utilized, but somehow some genius managed to do something. And I don't know if you guys ever played like Pokemon Blue, but it was like a really weird, precise thing that you had to do if you wanted to catch Mew. It was a weird series of steps. And if you were off by like one step, then you couldn't do it. And like once you do it, then it's like you have Mew and it's a legitimate part of the game. Or like cloning items or Pokemon. And like I remember people at my school would have to explain to me, okay, you go to Cinnabar Island, then you start surfing up and down the right coast. And like that was how you did things when you played video games, because there was internet back then, but it was the very early stages of like the public having internet, and it just never occurred to anyone like, hey, you can get online and you could look this up. And even if you did, like, you didn't have YouTube back then, you didn't have Google like you have now, so you really wouldn't be able to find the answers you're looking for. Now, like, I will go back and play some of the Zelda Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. I got both of those games like 2001, I think. Never could beat those games until I was like 22 or 23. I got those games when they were brand new, and they were just unbeatable for me. Like, I couldn't even get past like the third dungeon out of like 8 dungeons for either of those games. And even now, like, I'm 28, I have to go on YouTube for some of these dungeons just to look up, okay, like, what do I do? What item do I use here? Like, I have a dozen items, but I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to get from this room to that room. Like, there's supposed to be a key somewhere, so I'll have to go to YouTube and watch some other guy fumble across the game for 20 minutes until he figures out what to do. And then I have to watch what he's doing while I'm got the game turned on. So I think now there's a technology that allows you to make the game easier for yourself. You can look up walkthroughs either like on YouTube, or like you can watch, read through a text on some blog from 20 years ago.
Anyone
like
remember gamer guides?
Yeah.
Gamer guides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are those still a thing? Those can't still be a thing.
No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
And like you were talking about like game or not gamer guides, but what was it you said like that doesn't come with the disc anymore?
The
manuals.
tutorial, the pamphlet
yeah,
things.
like those Zelda games, I remember they had a little tiny booklet, and it wasn't really a guide. It didn't help you with strategy or anything. It would just kind of say, this is an item that you will get in the game, and this is a fun little character that you will meet. But then when I was stuck in the game, those books were completely useless. So like even then, those books... And I think those games were aimed at a higher audience, or maybe they just assumed that 13-year-olds were smarter than what we were. Because, like, I remember me and my friend would talk on the phone for like an hour a night, and we'd both be around the same point, and I'd be explaining to him, this is what room I'm in, this is what dungeon I'm in, and he'd be like, yeah, I know where you're at. And then one night I called him and he said, I am so sorry, but I played the game for like 7 hours yesterday, and I don't remember how I did any of it, so good luck. And so I spent years not playing that game. But I think, like you were saying, like how Arkham City is it's a world of difference from Mario, but also I think like with some games you can choose how much you want to be good at it. Like with Arkham City, you could play just the main meat of the game, or you could spend like another 80 hours doing every little side quest. And I've never played Arkham City or any of the Arkham games, but like from what I understand, there's 2 different ways you could go. And I have a feeling somebody who played Mario Kart for 7,000 hours when they were a teenager, they could play the main meat of an Arkham game, but they might not be interested in Catwoman's side quest or whatever you do in the Arkham games.
I still always forget that there's the Catwoman DLC for that. It's ridiculous.
And that's another thing, like buying an add-on. Like, that's something that would have been unheard of in the 80s. Like, you buy Yoshi's Island.
I don't know if you really think that one through too much. 80s maybe, but anyone else remember the Mega Drive?
No.
Yes.
The Sega Mega Drive for like Sonic and Knuckles. You could like there was Sonic 3 came out, and that wasn't really the full game because you needed the Mega Drive, which just gave the Genesis more processing power, and then you could do the Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And what was neat about that is it let you play as Knuckles in the other Sonic games and get to new areas that you couldn't before. So I mean, it's not downloadable, but it's the same damn concept, right? It's additional content for a game if you just purchase more shit. It's ridiculous.
But I know on Pokemon Yellow, if you played the game, I don't remember, you would take the Game Boy Color cartridge and somehow you could play it on a Nintendo system somehow. And if you did that with Pokemon Yellow, you could teach your Pikachu Surf, But you could not do that if you played it on the Game Boy Color. But there was like one character in the game who would say something like, "Hey, did you know you can teach your Pikachu surf? You can only do it if you have the Nintendo system." And I remember really wanting to do that when I was a kid, but I never had the Nintendo system, so I never did it. And so I guess that was more of a thing than what I realized.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was much farther and fewer between than DLC now, where, like, honestly, the game is the DLC. They just took it out. Like, what is it? Battlefront 2's getting ripped for a lot of that shit, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the game, because I feel like DLC is a cool device that certain games destroy and other games actually use really well. Battlefront's a good example of the game is worthless, and even the DLC added is kind of worthless. Like, the new Battlefront games are terrible. Anyone that has, like, even, like, an ounce of information or enjoyment of the old Battlefront games or just first-person shooters in general, those games are worthless. Like, I talk about not having a learning curve. The Battlefront games are so bad, you don't need a learning curve. If you just jump in and start hitting things, it'll be fine, because there is no strategy at all. But the DLC for that is partly terrible because, one, nothing in the game gets enhanced by the DLC. It's not like the game is a particular experience and the DLC adds new layers to how that experience is supposed to be organized. It's literally just, here's something you can do, but you can do more of it after the DLC comes out. Other games, though, like Xenoverse is actually really good with DLC, because the DLC packs are either more costumes, more stuff you can buy from the different shops in the game, or in Xenoverse 2's case, they actually added an entire mini game, and basically what they did is they had a free downloadable DLC that that creates an entire new section of the map that you can go to and collect figures and play like a mini card game with. And that has its own campaign and its own like currency and its own like stuff you can buy outside of the game. It's a free DLC that's literally just a new feature for the game.
Nice.
And that's fantastic. And the whole idea of that is, here's a game that we want to support for a certain period of time, so we release DLC to prolong the life of the game and enhance it before making a sequel, which is, I think, legit a good idea. Fighters is supposed to have like DLC support for up to 2 years before they come up with a sequel, which is cool. You're not releasing a game and then just waiting for the sequel to come out like we used to. But people abuse that, and suddenly you're basically just getting part of a game that you have to wait 2 years for, and then just buy a Game of the Year edition that has all the DLC.
Yeah. It's kind of what I did with Injustice. I ended up getting the gold version of that just because.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, this has all the DLC, but I'm still terrible at fighting games.
Would you, Ian? What would you say is a good version of a DLC versus like a really like don't do it versus a really well done version of that?
You know, I'm not a huge like again, I don't do a ton of modern gaming, so it's really hard for me to answer that. I liked the Catwoman DLC, but it's like a 2-mission thing at the beginning and end of the game for Arkham City, and I played the crap out of Civilization Revolution, and they had like 4 or 5 DLC packs for that game that just gave you either different scenarios or different wonders you could find that had other effects that were kind of weird. And that was kind of nice. It was just like an additional little feature, but you couldn't do that you couldn't use those online, which was, I don't know, I feel like I paid more. I should have the privilege of getting to use these other advantages the other players don't have online. I feel like that's only fair. Not that I did much online play, but still.
Another good way to go with this. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I had said earlier they didn't do this much in the games that I grew up with, but now that I think of it, they did it a lot more than what I realized. Like, the original Pokemon games, if you just buy, like, Blue, there's only a certain number of Pokemon you can catch. And you can beat all of the gyms and you can beat every character in the game without catching all 150. But the whole advertising, they really want you to catch 150. And so in order to do that, you can buy a game cable, which costs, I don't know, $30 back in the late 90s. And then, find a friend who bought Pokemon Red, and then you guys will trade. And that's kind of sort of the same thing, because you're buying an extra device in order to have a further enhanced version of the game. And then the Zelda games I mentioned earlier, you could play Zelda Oracle of Seasons, beat the whole game, and then it would give you this 20 character code. And if you entered that into Oracle of Ages, or vice versa, you could start with either one, then it would give you a slightly different version of that second game, and then you would get to fight an extra boss at the end of the second game. And so there's stuff like that, and those games go back to the late 90s and early 2000s, and I never really considered that to be DLC when I was playing those games, because I had access to all that. If I didn't have access to it, I probably would have considered it a kind of a cheat. If I only had one Pokemon game and no game cable, I would have been man, that really sucks. But I did have a game cable that I think a cousin lent me one, and then later I got one for a birthday, and then I was able to play with my own yellow version, my own blue version, and I was able to do it all. And so I never really considered that to be extras that you added on. In my mind, it was all just part of the same package, even though it really wasn't.
Pokemon's a really good example of that, because I feel like Pokemon is one of those. It is a series that just the structure of how you play that game guarantees people will play that game forever. Because the ideal way to play Pokemon is you go back all the way to Pokemon Yellow. I think Yellow's the first one.
Blue and Red were the first two. I know in America. I think they may have had different names in Japan, but Blue and Red were the first ones, and then Yellow was basically the same game. You play the same path, but you have a Pikachu for a starter instead of one of the other three.
Okay, yeah. So ideally, what you would do is you'd have 3 friends, and you'd buy Blue, Red, and Yellow, and you'd all get all 150 Pokemon for each game, and then trade out the ones that you need that the other versions have. And then you get the next generation of game, which I think was Gold and Silver.
Yeah.
And after you get to a certain point and you beat the Elite Four in that game, they let you transfer your Pokemon over from your previous game, which you do. And then you keep that chain reaction going all the way up until whatever the fucking modern game is. I think we're up to, I don't even remember. Sun and Moon. Are we still on Sun and Moon?
Either that or Black and White 2 or X and Y 2 or...
Yeah, I think we left X and Y back a while ago, but I think we're on Sun and Moon. I'm not positive. But ideally what you do is you keep trading up. So by the time you get to Sun and Moon, you aren't catching every Pokemon available in that game. You're just catching the 150 exclusive to that version, which is not that hard at that point.
Right.
And so by then you have these 800 or so Pokemon, not to mention all of the rarer versions, the shinies, the game exclusive versions, the version exclusive versions. Pokemon is just weirdly, there's no learning curve for Pokemon necessary because everyone kind of knows what you're doing, but the amount of strategy that it takes and the patience it takes to play Pokemon generation to generation is a really good microcosm of that particular type of gamer that grew up with video games and just kept learning all the way through. Because Pokemon games have gotten smarter too. The way in which you're interacting with everything, we don't have as many glitches anymore. The games have even become aware of what glitches are and how you can fix them. The whole sort of leave a Pokemon with Ditto in the daycare and they'll have an egg that's another version of that Pokemon was a glitch and then just became a game mechanic because Pokemon understood how that was going to go. So Pokemon scripting has just gotten so much better that I feel like anyone that's kept up with multiple generations of Pokemon is not thrown off by things like the Arkham games or hardcore shooters or anything like that, because the micro enhancement each game has made has been a really good way to not only count on your continuity of learning game mechanics, but also skills that are translated into other games. Being really good at any version of Mario Kart does not help you in any other video game franchise ever. But being really good at Pokemon Sun and Moon will actually help you with something else.
That's interesting. Well, like, I think, you know, that's worth talking about, because I remember Cracked, before they fired all their writing staff, did a whole video just about how hardcore gamers kind of hate Mario games. And the reason why is Mario's never changed.
Yep.
Well, I mean, obviously Odyssey is the new hotness right now and everything, but, like, Smash Bros, Mario Kart, they've gotten more complex, they've added more characters, but you can still be a 30-year-old man and get your ass kicked by a 4th grader in Smash Bros. And it doesn't matter how good at video games you are, you can get your shit handed to you in Smash Bros. Like, you know they have Smash Bros tournaments, right? But they are the most boring fucking thing ever because they have rules where they remove chance from the game. They do the same shit with Mario Kart. There are Mario Kart tournaments, but they remove the blue shells. So you cannot have a blue shell victory.
That would actually help me a lot, because I was terrible at Mario Kart. Anytime I got with a group of friends, usually from church, and someone had Mario Kart, I was always in last place. So I always... Actually, no, that wouldn't help me. Never mind. I would always get the blue shell. Yeah, never mind everything I just said. So yeah, that would actually hurt me a lot more. I would never get any...
Yeah, and like that's the whole point, is they want to make it about the strategy and the skill as a gamer, but like the whole point of those games is they have luck and chance built into them to help out the underdog players, and that pisses off a lot of like quote-unquote professional gamers because they want it all skill-based. And so Mario has a bell curve built into it to help people out that don't have much skill but just like the characters, and that's a lot of Nintendo games actually, which is crazy because Nintendo made their original games really, really hard on purpose to hide the fact that there's not that much game.
This is the thing that annoys me about like video game classicists. I don't know if that would be what you'd want to call video gamers in that way, but like the people that maintain that the best video games or the most challenging video games were like the classic like Mario Nintendo styled like platformers,
then you fuckers can go play some Kaizo levels in Mario Maker and be happy with yourselves.
Yeah, like I really don't like that sort of like weird elite. I mean, the other end of the spectrum is also terrible, that says modern video games are the best video games, but particularly that group of people. And I say that group of people are terrible because they're also the same group of people that are like, everyone our age has it easy because we're not old, and they like it's that annoying mentality of what we had was difficult and it built character and somehow that makes it better. But like, no, what you had was really bad and you just got aggressively good at something really bad, and now we actually know how to make video games, and so they don't suck quite as much.
I think that's maybe a little harsh, but okay.
It is, but then don't worry because I'll pick on our video games too. I think we have the same problem on the modern video game spectrum, because modern video game mechanics have a lot of like subliminal problems, and particularly when it comes to like gamers being sexist. I am convinced most of the reason video game dude bros currently that play shooters are sexist are because of the whole idea built into modern video games of literally if anything bad happens to you in a game, you can just walk it off. Like literally every video game ever at this point, if you are injured in any way, you just have to wait and you will be healed.
Yeah, I don't like that. I miss the you die and have to do it over.
Well, not only that you die and do it over, I miss like actually having to look for more health.
Yeah.
Like just the idea that you can be shot, and if you just hide behind cover or just keep running, at some point you are back to full health automatically.
Yeah.
That is a really bad mechanic, and we just keep doing it.
What started that? Because I remember the first game I played where you did that was Uncharted.
I feel like Call of Duty's been doing that for a while, but I can't like say for certain.
You might be right. Keep in mind, I don't do a lot of shooters. Like Uncharted is about the closest to a shooter I've ever done. So,
Honestly, I don't think the Tomb Raider game. I think the Tomb Raider games have like a legit health bar, but I don't remember. It's been a long ass time since I played any of them, and now they all do the same sort of like walk off the pain bullshit. But like that's the thing, right? Like old school gamers are just really satisfied at how crappy some of their stuff was, and new gamers are completely ignorant to like the social problems instituted by video game mechanics.
Yeah. I think also just briefly taking it beyond video games a little bit, I think there's always going to be that sense of back in my day, we had to walk uphill both ways and like it was so much different and better, or like we had it so much rougher, but like things were better for us back then. There's always going to be a little bit of that. Like I'm always going to hold on to the comics that were coming out in the early 2000s when I was first getting into comics. Even if I go back now and I look at the comics that were coming out at that time, and I'll say, wow, that story that I remember so fondly when I first started reading X-Men, it's actually not that good. There's some severe plot problems or whatever, but like my nostalgia will never let me just completely abandon it. Like I'll always look at that era and say that's a really awesome era of comics. And I think also the same is true for video games. The very first Mario game like is super hard for me, but I bet the people who I don't know if it's the first one. It's one of the first ones for I don't know. But I don't know the Mario chronology, but like, people who grew up playing it, even if it's like difficult to a fault, like where it's like they made it so difficult that it is a legitimate like objection, like objectively speaking, it's a problem. People will still say like, no, that game is the best game ever and screw Mario Odyssey. Like there's that. And then, but I think that's, and I'm not defending it, but I think that's a problem with everything, like cartoons, movies. Yeah.
I agree. And Ian, to your question, according to Google, the first game to do the regenerating health thing was Halo.
Okay. Yeah.
So close enough.
About right. Yeah. Okay. One thing that I think is interesting in the whole Mario and the hard game mechanics is I think it makes you better at the game, though. Would you agree with that? That having to go back and master the beginning level and have to get through it without getting hit so that you can have that upgrade on the next level and keep going and having that fear of having to start all the way over from the very beginning in order to make any progress. I think that just naturally makes you better at the game than the respawn 10 feet away from where you were method we do now.
Definitely.
Well, okay. I think that's fine if you're talking about video games in a linear level structure, but given that most games don't do that anymore, I don't think it really matters. And by that, what I mean is, yeah, I agree. If you just respawn where you last died in a campaign, that's problematic and a little bit too easy. But given that most video games now are based around the non-linear, like sort of like play online through different maps or
that's different,
puzzle solving and shit like that, like anything that doesn't require a linear progression forward through a story, that doesn't matter.
No, I agree, but I tend to focus on a very different thing. Like in a fighting game, you lose the fight. I don't expect you to have to go all the way back to the first fighter again. It's fine to restart with that guy. Or, I don't know, like, do they still do the totem pole method in a lot of fighting games?
Where you, like, just get bumped all the way down?
Yeah, where you get, like, you fight the first guy, then the second guy, and you keep going up.
Some of them
I would like
depends on the mode of the fighting game, though.
Yeah. I think like a method that would be more effective and would be a pretty good middle ground is you could lose progress and gain progress. Like, so, say, let's just use Mortal Kombat. If the poll is Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Shao Kahn, and you beat Scorpion, you beat Sub-Zero, you go fight Shao Kahn, you lose, you have to go fight Sub-Zero again. You lose to Sub-Zero again, you have to go fight Scorpion again. And you have to keep working your way back up the ladder, and you can lose the progress that you made. I think that's a more effective kind of method to help be that middle ground between mastering the game mechanics and not turning people off completely to the game kind of thing.
I think that fair.
So
but only
with the like adventure and platformer games, yeah, restarting over from level 1 is pretty bad. Restarting the level itself, not such a big deal.
I think that's fair to a degree. It's just like and this is part of the point of the topics. I think the landscape of how people engage with video games is so different now to where like I don't think
I'm not a gamer, so I'm probably talking completely out of my ass, and I've got like gamers listening to me going, "This guy's a fucking idiot right now."
No, I mean I don't want to say that. I'm just saying that like what you say makes sense, except for like the way. And I mean, I'll use a fighting game example. The people that fighting games are designed for now don't use the AI unless they're just practicing, because the AI does stuff that human players don't do. And if you are bad at the game and just spam it, the AI at some point will lose. Like, and I'll use Fighters because it's the most recent fighting game I can think of, and I've been playing it all day. In Fighters, there's a thing called a super rush, which is basically like you power up and rush into your opponent. That is a terrible move. You should not do that. You should never do that when you're fighting someone, because there's a really easy combo to knock you on your ass the moment you do it. But if you're playing in any sort of version of the game, no matter what difficulty you're on fighting the AI in that game, if you just keep super rushing, you will win, no matter what. Because the AI doesn't seem to know that combo for some reason. So like the idea of having like any sort of total pull system is cool, but fighting games now are designed to train you well enough so that you can start fighting people. And Fighters, again, I hate the menu that does this, but Fighters assumes you're going to play online almost exclusively. And the reason Fighters has 2 years worth of support built in with the DLC is almost exclusively so you can play online. And in a system that plays online, those kinds of like tweaks just don't make sense.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Steve, I don't know if you saw this comment, but I was really proud of my Mean Girl levelness with it. When you were doing your Fighters live stream the other night, I was like, Steve, play online. I want to watch someone who's good at the game.
Oh, yeah, that was adorable. I loved that. Yeah, no, I am not particularly great at that game, so, like, I will lose. But, like, people that are, like, it's ridiculous how easy the story mode is if you're good at that game.
Well, like, what I don't even understand at this point with modern gamers is, like, how a game can come out, and no one has had any time to practice, but yet someone has already mastered it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like this sort of video game language that's just sort of assumed. Like, if you've played Street Fighter, I don't think it will take you more than a few minutes to figure out Fighters. But, like, I don't know. It's a weird thing where, like, the Fighters as a game is bringing in a lot of hardcore fighters, but it's also bringing in a lot of hardcore Dragon Ball Z fans that never played a hardcore fighting game. So, like, the hardcore fighter games are like, I don't understand what this Super Kamehameha instant transmission bullshit is. While the Dragon Ball Z fans are like, what do you mean the combos change when my character's in a different direction?
Yeah, it sounds difficult. And for me, who's just god awful at fighting games, that sounds like a nightmare.
and what you're saying, Ian, about like how someone will like the game has been out a week and already somebody has like beaten every level of the game, like there's nothing left for them to do. That kind of goes back to what I was saying about like those early Pokemon games where somehow somebody at my middle school in the middle of Tennessee was like, they've mastered the cloning process. And it's like, how did they find out? Like, I want to know where this started. Like, you know, somehow word of mouth would spread from school to school. Like, who was the originator of that? Like, someone had to have played those games for like 1,000 hours and was just messing around and found this thing. And then, like, it spreads. And, like, this was pre-internet. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to diss anyone who wants to spend as much of their time playing video games as they want. Because, like, I think we all have that thing where, like, I waste all my time just going back and forth between Facebook and Twitter. But, like, you know, someone else, they may spend, like, the entire day or the entire week playing, like, a video game. And they will find, like, they will master it in just an absurd amount of time. Whereas for me, if I bought a video game now, I would probably take 6 months to a year to play it and master it. Like, but there are people who like they're going to do it just in no time at all, because that's like that's what's important. I don't want to say that's what's important to them, but they're putting that over some of the stuff that I would be putting over a video game, I guess.
And I think it's fair to say, because with what you're describing of like how word of mouth gets out and with certain video games back when you didn't have a culture that was thriving on it, I think it's fair to say that video game companies noticed that this was happening. And so now they're trying to account for as many glitches as possible, and they're not stopping the glitches. They're just trying to make it seem like it's part of the game. Mm-hmm. Like, you still mod PC games to get different costumes, but instead of like blocking that feature, we've just now accepted that people want different costumes, so we just keep throwing different costumes as part of a gaming mechanic. Mm-hmm. Pokemon games again are a really good example of this. Of like, here's some kind of coding error, so this one particular Pokemon looks different and spawns differently than the rest. Cool, let's make it a shiny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really bizarre how video games have like taken everything about them that required practice and implied and implied premises that are basically glitches and have now just been marketed as no, we'll just rewrite the script to make this part of the game.
Mm-hmm. See, and ultimately, I don't think that's game design. I think that's really good marketing. You know?
It is. It totally is.
Oh man. But at the same time, games have kind of always had those like dev things built into them, and it's just people discovering them. And as that's gotten harder to do, like to discover dev skips, because we've, gotten better about locking that stuff off. Games aren't written by hand anymore. The coding, isn't written by hand anymore. That's not a thing anymore. So like, Mario ROM hacks are not a thing anymore. Or, well, people are still doing them, but there's no ROM hack of Odyssey, right? But yet, what do they do to fill that void? Mario Maker,
Yeah.
It's just kind of people have gotten aware of what game designers have gotten aware of what their audiences do. Like Sonic Forces, from what I've heard, is not a very good game, but I'll give Sega credit in that they clearly listen to their audience. Have you guys played the DeviantArt Sonic game?
No.
Okay. I want you to both open up DeviantArt, and people listening, do this at home too. If you're on your computer, open up DeviantArt and search your first name, and then either the hedgehog or the fox after it, and that's your original Sonic fan character. It will come up. I promise. You'll find Steve the Hedgehog or Steve the Fox, and Ruben, you'll find Ruben the Hedgehog, Ruben the Fox. Please do.
Okay.
So the Sonic fan community loves their custom fan characters. So what did Sonic Forces do? They added a custom character to the story. It's kind of the most adorable thing ever that you can create your own character and not only like just be in the background, but like have levels where you're running through the level with Sonic. They also brought back the boost formula that's
really kind of badass.
Yeah, it's not a good game, but still, they did this thing that fans have clearly been wanting for a long time. But this is just listening to your audience. It's kind of crazy that Sonic Generations is a game that came out 2011, so 7 years ago. People are still modding and adding levels and alternate costumes to that game because of how much they love the engine design and stuff. So Sonic Forces was an attempt to try to recapture that and bring the engine back.
Well, and video gaming and coding as a industry has just been so community oriented ever since it began that I think video games just have a natural disposition to making things like modding and custom characters work better than anyone else. Like, their fan films are difficult because some studios and some franchises are okay with you doing it. Most of them aren't, and it's an uphill battle. Video games, though, have you ever really seen a video game industry like crack down on mods? They don't approve, but like, when's the last time The Sims were like, okay, we're shutting down all these mods? Why would they possibly want to do that?
Mods, definitely not. Let's Plays, Nintendo got pretty shitty about Let's Plays at a certain point.
Yeah, they did. Let's Plays are a bit of a different animal, partly because of just, like, reproducing animations and shit. Like, yeah, no, I mean, I'm not agreeing with it, but, like, given the way streaming websites work and, like, automatic copyright flags and stuff, there are certain things you just can't do on streams, and then the video game companies just run with it and act like this is how it's supposed to be, which is bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like, if you even if you stream and you're like, so like, let's say for example you're a sponsored Let's Player on YouTube, and like Bandai Namco just sent you Dragon Ball Fighters for you to play. If you play it online and you play it with some modded skin, they will not go after you for that. They do not give a shit. And that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm sorry, I got curious to see if there's been a new Ian the Hedgehog added to DeviantArt. I had to go do a quick Ian the Hedgehog search.
I was just kind of like lost, just looking through Ruben the Fox and Ruben the Hedgehog. I think that like it's one thing that I've noticed about Let's Plays is they tend to focus more on like if it's a brand new game, they're like no don't do that, but like I will find like multiple versions of like those Zelda games I was talking about, and those are like, you know, almost 20-year-old games now, and it's like, oh well, we don't care about that. And I mean, you could literally find the entire Zelda Oracle of Ages or Oracle of Seasons on YouTube. Like, there are enough players who have put up just 10-minute chunks of that game, and like you just find the entire game of that. And so I'm of two minds on it myself, because like I would, if I was someone who higher up at Nintendo, I would be afraid if someone who like makes a lot of money like promoting video games and their whole channel is based on video games, if they bought like the newest whatever from Nintendo and then they did a Let's Play and they were kind of unfavorable of it, because it's basically like, I don't watch a lot of Let's Plays, but it's basically just a really long prolonged review, right? Like they're just kind of talking about what they like and dislike as they play it. So if they came down and said, wow, I really did not like this Mario game as much as the last one, or I didn't like this Sonic game as much as the previous ones, or whatever, or if they found something, they said, wait, this is a really sucky feature, then I guess the higher-ups are afraid that that's going to deter sales of the game while it's still being sold. So I can kind of see their point, but at the same time, like, if they're just... It's always going to look like a huge corporation that's just being a bully to some little person on YouTube who doesn't make a tenth of what, you know, the corporation makes in a day or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Video games are weird, and also just when you talk about like copyright law and the whole concept of copying in general, we're like, okay, let's say you have a movie playing on your TV and you use a camera to record the movie playing on your TV. Clearly, this is copyright infringement, and you don't want to distribute it. Like, you're not supposed to do that. But let's say you have a video game, and you have a capture card, and you're just streaming yourself playing this video game. There's something about that legally is not wrong in the same way, and no one can really make the case that it is, because it's a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's more interactive. Like, with a movie, there's nothing... I don't know, like, if I go to see a movie in the theater right now, I'm paying the money, and then if I illegally filmed that movie and uploaded it and then someone else watches it, that's just as interactive on their computer as it is in the theater. I mean, it's illegal as heck, but it's still the same level of interaction. But with a video game, if I watch a Let's Play on Steve's channel, then I can watch it and enjoy it, but I'm not getting the interaction that Steve is, and so maybe that's why there's not as much of a stigma against it.
Yeah, I mean, like, the whole
quick question to interject. I want to do a round table here. You bought a game because you saw someone doing Let's Plays, and if so, what game was it? For me, it was Injustice.
I haven't, no.
Hitman.
Okay. Just that's my go-to for any time I hear someone talking about the legality of Let's Plays. I'm like, I know I've bought games because of Let's Plays. I'm not a gamer at all, but like Let's Plays
I've been
just made it
hyper
look fun.
disappointed by that too, where like see someone play a game and I'm like, oh my god, this looks so awesome. Then I buy the game like, this is terrible. Let me just watch the Let's Play.
Yeah, but you still already bought the game, sucker.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I completely agree that like that's a fine way to market things, and we should just do that to sell more copies of video games. But it's also a testament to how much fun Let's Plays are, is if you can watch someone Let's Play a game that you still think is terrible.
Have you ever, on the opposite end, have either of you ever seen a Let's Play and that convinced you not to buy a game?
Sure,
Ooh,
but like
yes.
so same with reviews, you know. Like for a while there, I was saying, because I was sure it would never happen, I was saying I'd probably buy a PS4 if the next Sonic game brought back the boost engine, and then Forces brought back the boost engine, but everyone told me, yeah, it's actually really awful. They still screwed it up. They brought back the one thing that was working, and they still managed to screw it up because Sonic the Hedgehog is a trash franchise that can never be handled properly, and it hurts. So I didn't buy a PS4. It's so weird. There's been a number of games that have come out where I'm like, man, I almost want to buy a PlayStation just to play that. PS4 just to play that. And I'm like, there's probably enough that I could probably justify that decision. But now, not only do I have to spend like $300-400 on a PS4, I'd have to spend like $50-60 a game. So
Yeah.
I'm like $600 in the hole here. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm out. I'm out of the current game industry. I remember I was in the console wars of 2007. I was there to see the guy buy a PS3 just to burn it because he was an Xbox fan and he wanted to take one from us. I remember those days.
Those were dark times. I remember when someone got
times.
shot because they bought the last PlayStation 3.
What?
Oh, God. Oh.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you think that's crazy. In Russia, someone shot someone in a supermarket because they had a disagreement about Kant.
No, that's just Russia. That does not sound crazy to me at all. That sounds like Russia.
It also sounds like philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like there would be less stupid bickering in philosophy if violence were more readily accepted as a form of protest, you know?
This is true. This is true. If I could just kill the guy saying he doesn't like a doornail, we would be so much better off.
Yeah. Anyway, we need to fill a couple more minutes. What else is something we can talk about with video games?
You were asking if we've ever been convinced by a Let's Play. Like, when I first started playing video games and when I stopped playing video games, like, on a regular basis, that was all before Let's Plays became a thing. But I will say, like, I first got into video games. My parents had sent me and my sister to a day camp. It wasn't even a day camp. It was just they took us there at like 8 in the morning and came and picked us up at like 3 or 3:30 or whatever, and we would just. It was just for a week, and it was like we did a different thing each week. And there was this older guy. I mean, when I say older guy, he was like, maybe 4 years older than me, who was not really part of the age group of that particular thing we were doing, but I think he was supposed to be part of a different group, but they weren't meeting on the first day, so he was there with us, and he had a Game Boy Color and a Pokemon Blue, and he let me play a little bit. Basically, he just said, like, yeah, start a new game, but then do not save the game, because he already had one saved. And then that wasn't on YouTube or anything, but I got to see him play it a little bit, and I was interested, and he could tell, and I was probably being really annoying, and he was like, I'm just going to let this guy play, and then, that'll get him off my back. And so I played a little bit of it. It was really horrible. And then I remember, I think at the time, you could go to Walmart, and they would have, like, a Game Boy Color mounted to the wall, kind of, and they'd have like, Pokemon Blue or Pokemon Red, like, in the game or in the system, and so you could play that if no one else was playing, and then if there was, then you just watch whoever's playing. You'd watch them do it, and so that was what kind of got me into the Pokemon stuff. And then from there, it would be like, okay, there's this other thing. Like, I played Wario before I ever played Mario. And so, like, I don't remember if my parents were just like, okay, he's already played these Pokemon games. His birthday's coming up. Let's just get him this thing here. It's the same system. And then, like, so I didn't really branch out a whole lot, but, like, that was kind of, like, it started with me watching someone else playing a video game, but it wasn't online or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I've definitely had that, and like I remember those experiences. Ruben, Steve, you have a sister, and Ruben, I don't know, are you an only child?
No, I've got a younger sister.
Okay. Well, like, I grew up watching my older brother play video games. So, like, you know, he played GoldenEye, and he played Metal Gear, and he played StarCraft. I remember watching Gabriel play those games, and I could just sit there and watch him for hours. And so, in a way, it's like proto Let's Playing, right? It's just you're right there, and you're kind of watching the older kid. And that's at least my experience, and I feel like a lot of people kind of had that same thing. And then Let's Players was like watching someone who you didn't feel annoyed that you couldn't take the controller away from, and that was also actually entertaining and sometimes, you know, good at the game.
Sure. This actually kept up for quite a while, even when I was a lot older. But I remember because I was the only person in my house that played video games, because I was the only person that did it, everyone was kind of fascinated by video games. So, like, I remember being a kid and, like, turning on a game, and my mom and my dad and my sister would all just, like, come into my room and just sit there watching me play the game for hours. It got so crazy to the point that when fucking Arkham Knight came out and we got the PS4, we hooked it up to the living room, like, giant flat screen TV, and everyone would just sit there, like, eating dinner and relaxing and shit while I'm playing a video game.
See, and
it's like they're watching a movie.
I know. I remember always thinking about that, like, because all of my favorite games, I think, my favorite games are on the PS2, and I think a lot of them have really good stories. Jak 2, Jak 3, Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, God of War, Prince of Persia. I think those all have, like, really great, compelling stories, and I remember playing those games and thinking to myself, man, you could edit a movie out of this. You could just take the cinematics and take the bare minimum of gameplay footage and cut them together, and this could be a film. People could watch it, and it would be fine. And like that's just a thing now. Like you don't believe me? Go on YouTube, search, I don't know, God of War the movie, and you'll see someone has done exactly that. They have taken the cinematics from the first game, intercut them with the bare minimum of gameplay necessary to give you the story of God of War 1. It's just a thing that's happened. It's changed the medium so much.
Well, and video games have facilitated this too, where like certain games would have like a record feature where it would save certain interactions you do, or now the PS4 has a whole video capture feature where you can just like edit out and share little movies of you doing stuff. Uncharted as a franchise is entirely built on the notion of you're in one long cutscene. It doesn't always work, but for the most part, they want it to feel like you're in one long cutscene.
I don't know if this is something that you guys were thinking about the conversation going in this direction, but when you talked about this was going to be our topic last week, Steve, I was thinking about when I was younger, it seemed like there was this huge stigma of parents and like parents of my generation, our generation, just being fundamentally against video games and like, oh, video games are going to turn your mind into garbage and stuff like that.
You can thank Hillary for that one.
Right. And like, I don't know if that was as much of a thing as what I thought, because I had a friend growing up who, to hear him say it, his mom thought that all video games were the devil. And it got to the point where one time when I had been talking to him on the phone, I think she had, or maybe I had called to see if he was home, and she answered. And I was like, hey, and I must have threw him under the bus doing this and didn't realize I did it. But I said, do you hate video games? Like, I even just asked her up front, and she was like, no, like, and she said, like, you know, I think Mario is fine and stuff like that. And so I must have just been hearing a lot of that from him, and just thinking like, oh, all parents think that video games are the devil. And like my parents, they would limit my video game play. Like my grades weren't as good as they should have been. So it's like, okay, you're only playing Pokemon 15 minutes a day until you get your grades up. And it's like, I probably interpreted that as like they are against the video games also. And I think that maybe it's just that I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a gamer. I'm not like on the forums where people are discussing gaming topics. But I feel like that's not a thing anymore. And I wonder if it's because people who grew up in the 80s like who the people who first played like the first Mario game and played in arcades, all afternoon, those people are now parents with children who are like old enough to play video games. So I wonder if that stigma is gone now because like the people who are now parents, they were gamers when they were younger.
Well, Ruben, I feel like what we got to talk about here is the devil's jazz music infecting the youth and make them want to try the reefer. Okay.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the real
stigma's
conversation.
Gone. But do either of you remember Jack Thompson?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, so back in the day, Jack Thompson was this lawyer from, where was it? Ohio, maybe?
Sounds about
he
right.
was this, like, fucking Ivy League educated, old, rich white dude who was obsessed with modern culture, and he would get huge numbers of families that were victims of murders, deaths in the family, murders, armed robberies of any kind, and he would just try and get all of them to rail against Grand Theft Auto, where like if someone's family member died, he'd go to them and say, okay, he would investigate to the point of, okay, did this person have any relationship whatsoever to GTA? Yes? Okay, now we're suing GTA.
So he's kind of like Frederick Wortham in the 50s.
Exactly like that. Except with Wortham, you got a sense of at least he had like a real respect and concern for children. He was just a terrible person and didn't know anything, but he at least cared about children. This dude was just a paranoid freak. He thought rap music was the devil. He thought computers were the devil. He thought anything bad that happened in society after the invention of video games could be blamed on video games. And somewhere along the mid-2000s, he got disbarred for being basically insane, which is accurate. But the whole idea of video games being bad for you, you can't prove. Like, there are studies and stuff where you can, like, see why art and literature and all of that stimulates people and it creates more empathy and affect and stuff. Video games don't have that same luxury. Like, as much as I think video games are art, you will be really, really hard-pressed to find any correlation between a person's personality and them playing video games. It's just really, really difficult. But part of the reason
more than anything, video games are very much an escapist medium.
Yeah. Like, it's really hard to, like, tack any personal consequence onto video games given the way they're designed. But despite that, people like this guy and this guy in particular are the reason that we have this giant discord of video games are bad for you. I don't think GTA helped anyone. When you literally create a game called Grand Theft Auto, it's really hard to like get people on your side. But people like this in particular that just inherit the notion of anything that you do in media that isn't pure and clean and wholesome white Christian is bad for you. That's never truly going to go away, but it's aided constantly by these people in power that keep wanting to push some kind of like public agenda against these kinds of things. Like that idea would not have gotten traction if this guy was not obsessed with suing Grand Theft Auto.
Mm-hmm.
There's this guy that I knew. He was as old enough to be my dad, and he was in charge of a ropes course for children. Like, he would do a lot of different obstacles and stuff, and he had this joke he would tell us whenever he would do, like, speakings at our church, and he would say that they don't write about the 89 kids that made it home safely. They're going to write about the one kid that didn't make it home safely. And I think that, like, in regards to video games, like, you'll have a situation like just recently there was the Slender Man killing, I guess. Some girl, in order to please Slender Man, like, she killed a girl, or a girl killed another girl. And so it's like they're all going to focus on that. They're not going to focus on the millions of people who have played the Slender Man games and haven't murdered anyone. All they care about is the girl, the one singular person who has. And it's kind of like the Scream movies. I don't know if you guys ever watched any of those, where like after that, in the first movie, before it even came out, like in the movie itself, what's his face? The main bad guy from that, he said, movies don't create killers, they just make them more creative. And then, oh boy, isn't it bad luck that that movie inspired a couple of kill. Well, I don't want to give too much credit to the movie, but it's like a couple killers, they said, yeah, we watched the movie, and that kind of gave us the idea. And it's like, oh wow, that's kind of what they were talking about in the first movie. And I feel like you're gonna have that with video games, where yeah, you may have an unstable person who killed somebody or killed multiple somebodies, and then they may say, yep, I played video games, and that's going to look really bad for gaming. And you're like, these people, like that lawyer, who they're not going to think about, or maybe they will and are deliberately ignoring it, they're not going to think about the millions of people who have played that same game and are completely socially stable.
And I mean, to be fair, video games never seem to do themselves any favors. I honestly don't think you will become a violent, like, homicidal maniac from playing video games unless there's something else wrong already.
Right.
But video games, they don't like to tread cautiously. They don't like to respond to responsible things. At least not in the same way movies or TV or anything else does. So. And this is part of why gamers, in particular, are a really, really hard fan base and tend to be extremely sexist and tend to be extremely problematic and horrible people. Just as a fandom, video games are terrible. But it's partly because of that. It's partly because GTA comes out and GTA says, we're not going to dial it back. We're just going to keep poking you with more and more GTA games. Like Bully, if anyone remembers that game, that's another good example. Yeah. Like, that is a horrible idea for a video game. Grand Theft Auto I can kind of get behind, at least with like the whole idea of gangster films. Why the fuck would anyone want a game called Bully?
Steve, to be fair, I played that game. It is hella fun.
I'm not saying it's not, but like, there's no way you can like contextualize that game to be socially okay.
It's not at all. And I think this goes to the escapism element. I think that the hyper-violence and elements like that in video games, the expressly not socially acceptable behavior, I feel like that is a way to funnel those feelings. Because I think everyone has once vividly imagined murdering their boss. I am going to hold to that one. You don't have to admit it. That's okay. But I think everyone has done that at one point in their life.
It's true.
So, like, I feel video games kind of just cue into that aspect of the human mind where you get to live out those kind of, more sadistic fantasies and stuff without actually hurting anyone. And so that's why I think
there's degrees to that, though, because that's the same argument as, or at least for me, it's the same argument as why it's not okay to tell rape jokes. Of like, in order for these kinds of things to be understood and entertained, you have to assume the people interacting with them understand these things also. So like, a rape joke is funny insofar as the people in the audience understand what rape is. A racist joke is funny insofar as the audience understands racism. And so I'm not saying you can't laugh, but clearly you're a bad person for making those jokes because you're facilitating that social context to constantly be recreated. You create a racist context by making a racist joke. You create a rapist context by making a rape joke. Bully as a video game as opposed to something like Grand Theft Auto is the same thing where like you have to understand and want to bully people in order to make bullying fun. And that's a fundamentally different thing than Grand Theft Auto, which to its credit usually has really good stories.
Fair. No, I think that's where that element comes from. It's not necessarily saying that you need to keep it that way, but I do think that's where that comes from. And again, my favorite games are heroes. God damn it. Jack and Daxter, great heroes because they take on a fascist government. Otherwise,
who was it online that was saying that Mario is actually just a hitman? Like he gets coins.
Mario is a Stalinist.
Okay. I saw this one thing and I cannot remember where I saw it, where they were like, Mario is just he's a paid mercenary. Like he gets coins and he goes into a castle and he assassinates the king, and then he rescues the princess, and it's like it's all just he's just paid to do it, and like so I wanted to say like, oh yeah, Mario's a hero. It's like, oh wait, no, he's just a paid mercenary or a hitman.
Sonic's an eco-terrorist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Pokemon games, like PETA went after the Pokemon games. Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
Pokemon tries really hard to dial back the animal cruelty part, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember in one of the Pokemon games, like, I remember someone showed me this, where, like, someone mentions that there was a war where Pokemon were used as weapons. I'm like, yeah, that would be a thing, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of the backstory of the first game, and it's like, that's the most interesting part of the game for me, and it's like, they barely get into it, but it's like, I want to see more of that. I want to see, like, a whole show built around that. The
Poke Wars.
Yeah. I
want to be the very best. Oh, man. Okay, so, like, we were talking about GTA and the, like, awful things you do, and I just always remember this one story my friend Andrew told me about him playing San Andreas. And he's just sitting on a rooftop with a sniper rifle, killing people. And his dad walks through the room and sees him light up a shot on some lady just walking down the street and blow her head off. And he just looks at it and goes, "That's awful." Just like he was so personally affected by just the CGI character's head blowing off. He's like, "That's awful. Why would you do that, son?" That story always amuses the hell out of me, and it's so dark because he's right. It is just terrible.
Have you seen the Zack Snyder remake of Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead?
No, I'm not.
Oh, there's a scene similar to that where they're shooting the zombies from the roof of the mall that they're holed up in, and like they made a game out of it. Like they're like, there's Burt Reynolds, and it's someone who looks like Burt Reynolds, and then they shoot the zombie, and like one of the characters is like, "This is like really disgusting that you guys are doing this." Like that sounds so similar to what you just said. I'm like imagining that movie the whole time you said that.
That's awesome. Okay, do we have anything else we want to talk about with this, or do we want to end the video?
I think I'm good.
Yeah,
okay.
I think this is a really interesting one because like we all come from such different. Like I was realizing about 3/4 of the way through, like the only thing I was referencing was Pokemon and Mario. It's so I had no idea where this conversation was going to go, but it was so interesting because we all come from such different gaming backgrounds.
Yeah. Just real quick round robin, just for shits and grins. What's your favorite video game? Start with Steve.
Favorite video game. Jak 2.
Jak 2.
Jak 2.
Ruben?
I will say it's really hard for me not to say one of the Pokemon games, one of the first 5 or 6, but they all are kind of like if you say Gold, it's just the same game as Silver or whatever. So like I'm not going to say any of those. I will say Wario Land 3 for the Game Boy Color. It's I remember I had hours and hours of playtime on that, and like I still enjoy that game. Like I will go back and play it again. Actually, my copy, the battery is no longer, it doesn't save anymore, so I don't play it much anymore. But like that's a game like I remember it so fondly, and like I was really disappointed because I got Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance, and it was not nearly as difficult. Like it was much easier for me to beat it. I think I beat Wario Land 4 in like a weekend, but like Wario Land 3 was a really I thought just a really fun game. It was just the right difficulty level for me. I don't know. I'm probably going too much into it, but I liked it.
Yeah. I love that Steve and I have the exact same answer. That's adorable.
It's just a really good fucking game.
It really is.
When I got that hoverboard, I used to just endlessly fly around for hours.
Dude, you have no idea. I went through a phase where I would just find ways to get to cool places and do like Batman poses as Jak, where I just look out over the city from like the top of a building and shit. Like, yes.
Stealing a guard's motorcycle and outrunning them was the coolest fucking shit back in the day.
Yeah, man, that's what it's all about. Okay, anyway. Everyone, thanks very much for watching this episode. Next week, It's a review topic. It's my topic. We discussed it. I'm going to be reviewing Black Panther. I'm sure that will be like the 95th time you've seen that movie reviewed on your various social media feeds. Sorry, I'm really excited about it. I want to talk about that movie in a video, so we're going to be talking about Black Panther. It'll get a ton of views, I'm sure, but it's going to be like one of a million Black Panther reviews, so it's whatever. Anyway, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the Exile.
And I am the Comics Kid 2099.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.